day here in Tucson. It was really hot, by the way. I almost melted when I went outside. I asked for suggestions, and I have a whole sheet of subjects that people want me to talk about, and I certainly will go through them. Again, if you want to have continuity, it would be great if you would subscribe at the bottom of the YouTube presentation. And about several weeks ago almost, we had like 7,000 viewers. And that's in the few months that we've been doing this. So it certainly is a brand new ministry, in a way, which I've really been enjoying doing. Yeah, a young lady wrote, "I would like you to speak on divorce." So I'm going to do that today, before Lynn joins me and doing several presentations together as a team. My wife is my team. Divorce is a tragedy. I sometimes think that it's easier to cope with death than the divorce. And death, it's final. But when you divorce, there's nothing final. And it goes on and on and on and on. Whenever you have kids in a marriage and you get divorced, oh my God, it is awful. I always had a counselor on staff, as I told you before, to help deal with for example, the issue of divorce. Again, divorce is a tragedy. It means that your relationship has completely broken down, and there's no longer any communication. Now, I know that sometimes people marry very young. They think sex is love. And maybe they started at a pretty early age. And so they think, well, that's the woman of my dreams. I'm going to marry her. And then after a few years, the buzz wears off. And sex cannot sustain a relationship. In the Orthodox Church, because we know you have two different or three different perspectives of divorce in Protestantism and in Roman Catholicism and in Orthodoxy. Orthodox notion of divorce is a recognition of the failure of this marriage. And therefore, when a couple decides they've reached the end of the road together as a couple, and of course I would always suggest they do it together and have the same lawyer instead of killing each other. In any case, when the relationship has broken down, and I've seen a lot over the years. In fact, there's one instance when I was living in Washington. This couple called me and started screaming on the telephone for me to get over to their house right away that he's going to kill his wife or she's going to kill him. And when I got there, they continued assaulting each other, insulting each other, to the point he picked her up and threw her through the window. So I said, "Do you have a piece of paper?" And anyway, they brought a piece of paper, pulled out my pen. I said, "You two cannot live together any longer. I am writing out your divorce now." The two of them looked at me and they said, "You want us to get a divorce? But we love each other." And they got mad at me because I said, "I'm going to write up your divorce." Sometimes it's just a farce. The victims in a divorce are the children, by the way. But when two people decide that there's a breakup, you go to the priest and you have confession. But in our church, you're not given communion until a divorce is finalized. Why? Because the in-between time, the couple are cursing each other, fighting over money, children, possessions. And I saw it with my own eyes. How could you go and take communion after you just called your husband an SOB? Or your wife something else? So in our church, because you have to remember, in the early church, marriage was a civil act. He took the wife to the house. They slept together. And on the next day or Sunday, they would go to the church to get the blessing of the bishop or the priest. The whole wedding service developed outside of the Byzantine culture. For example, the wedding crowns. We're the only church that has wedding crowns. In any case, you go to the priest. And if the two people are sane enough, you would have one lawyer. And do the division of goods in a sane and rational way. But the priest has to ask you to write down why you got a divorce. And I'm talking about a civil divorce. Because there's no such thing as an ecclesiastical divorce. How can a church undo what it did? That's a joke. This whole thing about divorce through the church happened during the Ottoman Empire. And it was a means of income for the bishops. It's an abuse of power. Because no clergy can undo, what do you do with the blood? Peace be to all, take it back. No. Marriage was always civil, with the blessing of the church, which gave it its sacramental character. You go to the city hall, you submit your papers. When the divorce is granted and irrevocable, you take that to the priest with a letter from the two parties explaining the nature of the background breakup, and that is sent to the archbishop. Now, some people think because there's a small fee that they're kind of like buying a divorce. You don't buy a divorce. Not possible. Whatever donation you give, it goes for the distribution to the poor. no one in the right mind can make money on a breakup. But there are papers that have to be filed. It does cost to set up a whole file on the person, especially if you want to remarry. We don't want you to make the same mistake twice. So a dossier is opened up, and the priest sends a letter recommending the archbishop to restore this couple to communion. The letter, I repeat, that comes from the archbishop is not an ecclesiastical divorce. It doesn't make any sense. What God has joined together, let no man put asunder. But what the bishop does, he restores the people involved in the divorce to communion. Because when you are in the process of divorce, you have broken communion with the church. You've broken communion with your partner, your spouse. You've broken communion with the community, with the family. And no one is supposed to take the Eucharist during that period in between. You really are like a learner, like a catechumen, until the archbishop, using economia, sends a letter to the pastor restoring the individuals to the Eucharist. And that's a very important distinction. And in the Roman Catholic Church, they have a whole different system. And I used to have to help out couples over the years that came to me for help from the Roman Catholic Church, because they did not believe in divorce. What's the word?
Annulment.
They use the word annulment, which in the Orthodox Church means that you got married to that person with bad intention, or you did not ever consummate your marriage, or there was deceit in the marriage. We do not have the same idea of annulment that they have in the Roman Catholic Church, because you cannot annul a marriage. A couple married 50 years, 40 years, all of a sudden you say it's annulled with 5 kids. I mean, 2 years ago, I had to intervene with the Vatican, with their marriage tribunal, because an Orthodox girl married to a Catholic boy, they refused. They wanted to give her they wouldn't give her a so-called annulment, and it cost thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to get that annulment. We do not have that. Nor do we have the cavalier attitude in Protestantism, where the couple marry each other before the community so they can break up with each other with impunity. The Orthodox notion of marriage is so deeply spiritual. And that's what makes it what we call a sacrament or a mystery. Because it's Christ who unites the couple. He's the third person. And if the relationship is broken down by infidelity or any number of issues, the church has mercy and allows a second marriage. After a period of penance, and after being restored by the Archbishop to the Eucharist. The approach of the Orthodox Church is much more human. It takes into account the situation in life, Sitz and Leben, situation in life of that couple. And the couple are taken through this process with the priest. So hopefully, the children of this couple will not be held hostage to the egos of the two people who so-called fight for the rights of the child. I have a brother that got a divorce. 4 kids. Do you know that we never, ever lost touch with Betty Jean, our sister-in-law? Even though later years she remarried and she had 1 more kid. We told her, you guys got the divorce, but we didn't divorce you. And you didn't divorce us. And the beautiful thing of my mother, and boy, I would suggest this to every mom. My mother embraced her unconditionally. And my grandmother too. Why? There were 4 children. And my mother wanted to keep those children in the bosom of the family. When my mother was very ill, Betty Jean would fly from Florida, come to our house and stay with my mom to take care of her. Invited to every wedding, every christening, every holiday, every family portrait has them all in that picture. Because my mother and father were wise. They did not want to lose their grandchildren. And they will also want to have a handle on those kids. They want to be there when the kids needed guidance. I know I'm talking a little bit more than I probably should, but these are important issues. Because I see it, when there's a divorce, I hear it all the time when I was in Montreal. The families start calling each other names and are swearing at each other. You know what confusion you put in the minds of the children? My parents did the opposite. Of course they loved my brother, but they loved the family more. And they wanted to keep the family intact. They never once attacked my sister-in-law. Never. And she was with us until the day she died of brain cancer. And we were always around her and with her. And my nephews and my niece, they loved my mom and dad to death. And they loved the whole family. Because my mother would not allow that the breakup of his son, their son with this good woman, to break up the family and lose those precious children. And my grandmother was still alive throughout this, so they called my grandmother Big Sito. Sito in Arabic means grandma. They called my grandmother Big Sito and my mother Little Sito. And it's a life lesson, the experience I had in my life. And I carried it on in my pastorate. I did everything I could to help couples from killing each other when they got a divorce. And sometimes I even settled the financial stuff to make the separation palpable or a little bit easier. But let's go back to the beginning. C.S. Lewis wrote about the Great Divorce. The Great Divorce is like any sin. C.S. Lewis spoke about the bent man or the broken man. And that's what divorce is. It's bent and it's broken. But the church, in her mercy, loves her children and allows healing, restoration, and most of all, forgiveness. Forgiveness is the key. And the church embraces the new reality of the family. And as a priest, for example, I would make sure their sons were altar boys so that I could influence them by my presence. I could influence them through the church. And I think it all helped. It all helped. So thank you, God bless. I'm glad you asked that question. I was meaning to bring it up. But Nancy Ann, thank you for your question. And keep them coming. Because I have a pile on my desk, but I like new ones. I want to stay fresh, and I want to answer, I want to respond to your issues. Well, thank you, and God bless. And pray God together. The most important thing to keep your marriage together is to be one in the church, and the church in your home, to pray together. And you see how issues can melt away through prayer. God bless you.